The universe tried to tear the US Odyssey apart. Alarms shrieked. A symphony of synthetic panic that was ignored by the 5 humans strapped into their crash couches. The ship was a toy in the grip of a titan, shaken by gravitational shears that groaned through its very bones. Outside the reinforced viewport, the clouds of Xylos weren't vapor and ice. They were a churning sea of superheated plasma and electromagnetic fury. Violet lightning, thick as city towers, clawed at the ship. It left incandescent scars across its ablative armor. Hull temperature climbing past 2,200 Kelvin. Dr. Eris Thorne's voice was strained, not by fear, but by the sheer physical effort of fighting his console. His knuckles were white where he gripped the stabilization bar. Structural integrity is holding, but she's screaming, "Commander, the atmospheric drag is twice the simulated maximum." "She can take it, Eris," Commander Eva Rostova replied. Her voice was a bedrock of calm in the chaos. Her eyes, a pale, icy blue, were fixed on the forward display. She tracked their descent vector through the storm. "Keep feathering the magnetic field. Don't fight the turbulence, flow with it." Strapped into the security station, Sergeant Jax Malone let out a low chuckle that was more of a growl. "Flowing isn't exactly what I'd call this, Commander. Feels more like being chewed on." He was a mountain of a man. His scarred hands rested near the deployment controls for the ship's kinetic barriers. His composure was absolute. To him, this was just another form of combat. "At least it's a dry heat," Dr. Kenji Tanaka muttered. His focus was on a biosensor display that was a riot of conflicting data. "Atmospheric composition is a mess. High concentrations of sulfur dioxide and argon, but the oxygen level is 32%. That can't be right. The Conclave's probes were probably incinerated before they got a clear reading." Specialist Anya Sharma called from the communications station. The planet's natural EM field was a wall of noise, but she was patiently teasing threads of data from the static. "I'm getting faint topographical scans. There's a valley shielded by a significant magnetic anomaly about 70 clicks from our projected landing zone. It's our best shot at surviving this." Rostova processed the information instantly. The original LZ was a bust, calculated by aliens who had never set foot on a world this angry. "New landing zone plotted, Anya. Eris, can you get us there?" "It'll be the wildest ride of our lives," Thorne grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Rerouting emergency power to the tertiary thrusters. It's going to get rough." He wasn't wrong. The Odyssey dropped like a stone, then bucked like a wild animal as it fought to correct its trajectory. A sheet of metal tore loose from the port nacelle, spiraling away into the violet maelstrom. The lights flickered, died, then came back on. Under emergency power, the bridge was cast in a grim, red glow. 10 clicks to the valley floor. Sharma announced, her voice tight. 5, 3, brace for impact. Rostova didn't need the warning. She had been watching the jagged, razor-like peaks of the valley walls rushing up to meet them. The final descent wasn't a landing. It was a controlled crash. The ship slammed into the ground with a sound of tortured metal that echoed through the entire frame. It skidded for half a kilometer, carving a deep scar into the rust-colored soil. Then, its bow plowed into the base of a cliff, bringing it to an abrupt, violent halt. Silence descended. It was broken only by the hiss of venting coolant and the distant howl of the Xylan wind. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, Rostova unbuckled herself. Her movements were steady. "Report. Structural integrity is compromised, but the main habitat is sealed," Thorne said. His voice was a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. "We're alive." Jax Malone just grinned. "Landing was a little rough, Commander, but any landing you can walk away from is a good one." Outside, the storms of Xylos raged on, oblivious to the impossible thing that had just happened. The planet had thrown its worst at the US Odyssey. The ship, though battered and broken, had endured. Its crew was alive. They had reached the crucible point 3 months earlier. The air in the grand chamber of the Sidonian conclave was ancient, still, and heavy with the weight of millennia. Eva Rostova stood on the central dais. The light from 1,000 floating lumens reflected in the polished obsidian floor. She and her team were the only humans present. They were stark figures in utilitarian black and gray uniforms, standing amidst a kaleidoscope of alien forms. There were the Kthar, hulking beings of crystalline silicon. There were the diminutive, insectoid Svis, who communicated through scented vapors. And there was the Conclave's ruling caste, the Sidonians. They were beings of such age and psychic potency that their physical forms had withered to frail, almost vestigial frames supported by elegant suspensor fields. Proctor Valerius, eldest of his kind, drifted towards them. His physical body was little more than a whisper of bone and translucent skin, but his mind pressed down on the room like a physical weight, ancient and immeasurably arrogant. Commander Rostova, his voice echoed, not from his mouth, but directly in their minds. It was a dry, rustling whisper. The Conclave has reviewed your species' petition for full membership, an ambitious request for a race barely a century out of its own cradle. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Humanity believes its contributions warrant consideration, Proctor. Indeed, your species possesses a certain vigor, a reckless energy, Valerius conceded. The compliment was a carefully wrapped insult. It is this vigor that has led us to propose a unique opportunity, a chance for humanity to prove its mettle, to demonstrate a worthiness that transcends mere technological parity. Behind him, a vast holographic display shimmered into existence. It showed a swirling, violent sphere of violet and ochre. Planet Xylos, Valerius announced. A world we classify as Malignant 9. It has been a persistent challenge. Images flashed across the screen. A Kthar research vessel, its crystalline hull shattered by lightning. A Swiss biosphere, corroded from the outside in by atmospheric toxins. Wreckage scattered across a landscape of razor-sharp mountains and boiling plains. 17 expeditions from 17 of our most seasoned member species have attempted to establish a foothold. All have failed. The world itself seems to reject life that did not spring from its own hostile soil. Jax Malone, standing behind Rostova, shifted his weight. The subtle movement was a clear sign of his disdain for the Proctor's theatrics. Eris Thorne watched the geological data on the display with a focused, analytical hunger. The Conclave believes Xylos holds the key to a great mystery, the Proctor continued. His voice took on a tone of feigned reverence. We have detected artifacts of the architects, the great progenitors from whom most galactic life descends. To recover their legacy would be a sacred duty, a task that requires a unique approach. Rostova understood perfectly. A task for the expendable. You propose to send us where 17 superior species have failed, she stated, her tone neutral. We propose to give humanity a chance to succeed where caution and traditional wisdom have not, Valerius corrected. Smoothly. Your species' renowned adaptability, your history of thriving on a world of unusual hostility, makes you uniquely suited. Establish a permanent, self-sustaining outpost. Survive for 1 standard year. Do this, and the Conclave will grant humanity full membership status, recognize sovereignty over 3 systems of your choice, and access to our Tier 1 technological archives. The offer was immense. It was far more than humanity could have hoped to achieve in a century of normal diplomacy. It was a devil's bargain, and everyone in the chamber knew it. They were sending humanity to die, but cloaking it in the language of opportunity. Rostova glanced back at her team. Sharmas' eyes were narrowed, already analyzing the unspoken data. Tanaka stood perfectly still, his calm masking a fierce intellect. Jax met her gaze and gave a barely perceptible nod. They had trained for this. Not just for a mission, but for this exact brand of patronizing arrogance. My team will require a vessel of our own design, with our own technology supplemented by your standard deep space comms package, Rostova said. To Valerius's mind voice conveyed a flicker of amusement. Of course, a touch of home to comfort you in the end. It is a small request. Do you accept the mission, Commander? The chamber was silent. The ancient alien beings watched. Their thoughts were a palpable wave of pity and condescension. They saw a young, foolish species, too proud to refuse an impossible challenge, marching willingly to its grave. They did not see the truth. They did not see the descendants of a species that had clawed its way to dominance on a death world of its own. A species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and itself. A species that saw a malignant, 9 world not as a tomb, but as a challenge, On behalf of the United Earth Alliance, Rostova said, her voice clear and steady, ringing out in the ancient hall. We accept. Her confidence was so absolute, so devoid of the expected fear or bravado, that for the first time in 1,000 years, a flicker of genuine uncertainty passed through the cold, ancient mind of Proctor Valerius. The metallic groan was the only sound for a full minute. Then, the emergency systems rerouted. The red glow of the bridge was replaced by the steady, functional white of the habitat's internal lighting. Well, Eris Thorne said, rubbing the back of his neck as he unstrapped himself. That's one way to bypass the landing sequence. Damage report is extensive, but we're in one piece, Anya Sharma confirmed, her fingers already flying across her console. The Odyssey won't be flying again without a full shipyard, but the habitat module, life support, and the fabricator are all green. We're operational. Then we're on schedule, Rostova stated, moving towards the airlock chamber. Gear up. We stick to the plan. Full assessment of the immediate exterior. In the airlock, the 5 Conclave-provided environmental suits stood waiting on their racks. They were bulky, overwrought contraptions of gleaming alloys and pulsing energy fields. They were designed by a committee of aliens, a committee that had long since forgotten what it felt like to walk on a world that wasn't perfectly terraformed. You have got to be kidding me, Jax Malone grumbled, holding up one of the massive gauntlets. I feel like a child's toy in this thing. How are you supposed to fight in this? You're not, Kenji Tanaka observed, examining the suit's biomonitors with a critical eye. You're supposed to hide inside it and pray the planet doesn't notice you. The filtration system is ridiculously overspecified for the atmospheric composition I'm reading. Conclave protocols, Rostova reminded them, her voice tight with suppressed amusement as she sealed her own helmet. For this first excursion, we do it by their book. We let their observers see us following their rules. The outer airlock door hissed open, revealing the rust-colored landscape of Xylos. The wind hit them first, a physical wall of moving air that made the heavily armored suit sway. Then came the gravity. It was like strapping an invisible version of Jax to your back, a constant, oppressive weight that made every step a conscious effort. The ground was a springy, moss-like carpet of crimson that crunched under their heavy boots. First steps on Xylos, Rostova broadcast for the benefit of any watching eyes. Gravity is significant. Movement is sluggish in the EX-7 suits. Visibility is moderate due to atmospheric dust. They moved out, a cumbersome procession of silver-suited figures against a backdrop of violet skies and jagged peaks. Eris immediately began taking geological readings. His suit's external sensors struggled against the planet's electromagnetic interference. Kenji knelt. His clumsy gauntlets made the simple act of collecting a soil sample an exercise in frustration. Commander, Anya's voice crackled over the comm. The EM field is playing hell with the suit's internal comms. I'm getting more clarity on my helmet's external speakers. Rostova stopped and looked at the data feed on her wrist display. Her suit was working overtime to cool her body against the 46°C heat. Yet, the wind felt refreshing against the heated viewport. The readings from Tanaka's atmospheric sniffer confirmed what she already suspected. All right, that's enough theater, she declared. With a hiss of depressurization, she unsealed and removed her helmet. The air that hit her face was thick. It was heavy with the scent of ozone from the distant storms and a faint, sulfurous tang like a volcanic field. It was hot, but not unbearable. She took a breath, then another. Her lungs, accustomed to Earth's comparatively thin atmosphere, drank in the oxygen-rich air. The effect was immediate. A dizzying rush of energy, a sharpening of her senses. The world seemed to snap into clearer. Focus. Air is viable, she announced, her voice carrying easily on the dense air. High oxygen content. Feels like being at high altitude, but in reverse. Ditch the helmets. One by one, the others followed suit, their faces showing relief as they shed the claustrophobic headgear. Damn. Jax breathed, a wide grin spreading across his face. Now that's what I call fresh air. Smells like home. If your home is next to a steel mill in Gary, Indiana. They worked for an hour, their efficiency increasing tenfold without the bulky helmets. They began unpacking the prefabricated components of their primary shelter, the core of what they would call haven. It was during this work that the planet decided to properly introduce itself. The roar came from the cliffs above. It was a chittering, high-pitched scream that echoed off the canyon walls. "Contact!" Jax yelled. He dropped a power conduit and raised his kinetic pulse rifle in a single, fluid motion. It came down the cliff face with unnatural speed, a nightmare of obsidian limbs and razor-sharp edges. It was the size of a grizzly bear, with 6 powerful legs that ended in hooked talons. This allowed it to scale the sheer rock as if it were flat ground. Its head was a wedge of crystalline armor, and its hide looked like overlapping shards of volcanic glass. A shard stalker. The creature launched itself from the cliff, landing a mere 20 meters from Kenji Tanaka. It was a blur of motion, a living rockslide aimed directly at the unarmored scientist that a conventional soldier would have panicked. A conclave team would have been dead. Jax didn't hesitate. He didn't fire from a distance. He charged. "Jax, no!" Rostova shouted, but it was too late. The sergeant met the creature head-on. The shardstalker lunged, its maw of splintered crystal teeth snapping at him. Jax, moving with a speed and power amplified by the potent atmosphere, sidestepped the attack. He slammed the butt of his rifle into the side of the creature's head. The sound was a sickening crack of rock on crystal. The beast staggered, momentarily. Stunned. It was all the opening Jax needed. He wasn't fighting an alien. He was fighting a predator, and humanity had a long and bloody history of dealing with those. He jammed the barrel of his rifle under the creature's armored jaw and pulled. The trigger. The kinetic pulse rifle didn't fire a bullet. It unleashed a concussive wave of pure force. The shardstalker's head vaporized in a shower of black and red. The massive body slumped to the ground, twitching once before falling still. Silence returned to the valley, broken only by the wind. The team stared, not at Jax, but at the dead predator. Eris Thorn let out a low whistle. The conclave logs said local fauna was lethally aggressive and highly resilient. Jax spat on the ground, his chest heaving. They just never tried hitting it hard enough. Rostova looked from the dead creature to her sergeant, then up at the alien sky. The first test was over. They hadn't just survived. They had pushed back. Here, on this malignant world, humanity had just posted its first eviction notice. The first month on Xylos was a blur of relentless labor. It was a testament to human grit. The Sidonian conclave monitored their vital signs, expecting to see degradation and decay. Instead, they witnessed a flourishing of activity that defied all their predictive models. Haven, the human settlement, grew day by day. It was not a fragile bubble of alien technology, but an extension of the planet itself. Eris Thorn, the team's geologist and engineer, was in his element. He discovered that the tough, bamboo-like reeds growing in the valley were silicon-based. When fired in a makeshift kiln powered by the Odyssey's failing fusion core, they transformed into a ceramic material. It was lighter than titanium, but with the tensile strength of carbon steel. He and Jax worked tirelessly, replacing the shelters. Flimsy, prefabricated walls with this new, resilient substance they dubbed xylocrete. The settlement began to look less like a crash site and more like a fortress. Its structures were angled to deflect the hurricane-force winds. Thorn's greatest breakthrough came from studying the crimson moss. He confirmed Dr. Tanaka's initial theory. It was a massive, planet-spanning organism that functioned as a biological capacitor. He designed a network of conductive filaments, woven from a metallic native vine. This network channeled the electrical energy from the perpetual lightning storms into a series of large, subterranean batteries. By the end of the second month, they had shut down the Odyssey's dying reactor entirely. They were running their entire settlement on the raw, untamed power of Xylos itself. They were living off the storm. Meanwhile, Dr. Kenji Tanaka worked his own miracles. Inside a geodesic dome glazed with transparent, impact-resistant resin synthesized from local sand, he cultivated a garden. He found that the high-oxygen atmosphere and mineral-rich soil, when supplemented with nutrients from their stores, accelerated plant growth threefold. He successfully cross-pollinated earth potatoes with a starchy xylan tuber. This created a hybrid that was packed with protein and grew to the size of a human head in 2 weeks. His work didn't just guarantee their survival. It ensured they would eat like kings. The planet was changing them, too. The constant struggle against 1.3 times Earth's gravity was grueling at first, but their bodies responded as human bodies always had. They adapted. Their bone density increased. Their muscles became thicker, more powerful. The oxygen-rich atmosphere supercharged their stamina. They became faster, stronger, and more resilient than they had ever been on Earth. Rostova and Jax took to sparring in the evenings. Their movements were crisp and powerful. Their friendly bouts looked more like clashes between titans. They were no longer just human. They were being forged by gravity and hardship. It was specialist Anya Sharma, who found the ghost in the machine. Her station was the nexus of Haven, a room filled with monitors displaying the chaotic symphony of Xylos's electromagnetic field. For weeks, she fought to filter the signal from the noise, trying to maintain a stable link with the relay satellite they had left in orbit. The constant storms, the planet's powerful magnetic core, the auroras that painted the sky at night. It was a communications nightmare. But Anya was a pattern seeker. She began to notice an anomaly, a faint, rhythmic pulse hidden deep beneath the roaring static. At first, she dismissed it as a natural phenomenon, perhaps a quirk of the planet's magnetosphere. But it was too regular. It was a slow, steady beat, like a colossal heart. Pulse, paused, pulsed, pause. It repeated every 10.37 seconds. Without fail, she spent a week isolating the signal. She used algorithmic filters of her own design to strip away the layers of natural interference. What she uncovered made the hairs on her arms stand up. It wasn't just a pulse. Within the rhythmic beat was a stream of impossibly complex data. It was structured in a way that screamed of intelligence. It wasn't a broadcast. It was the planet's operational baseline. The storms weren't random. They were part of a regulated cycle. The seismic tremors followed the same rhythmic pattern. The planet wasn't just hostile. It was controlled. She worked feverishly, cross-referencing the signal with their long-range topographical scans. Using the slight Doppler shift from 3 separate sensor posts, she began to triangulate the signal's origin. The source wasn't in space. It was on Xylos. On the 67th day of their mission, she called an emergency meeting. The team gathered around the main holotable in the command center. "I found something," she began, her voice tight with excitement. She projected her findings onto the table. A 3D map of the region appeared. It was dominated by a massive mountain range to the north, a jagged scar across the planet's surface that the team had nicknamed the Titan's Spine. "For weeks, I've been tracking a signal buried in the planet's EM field," she explained. She highlighted the rhythmic pulse, now translated into a clear waveform. "It's not natural. It's too complex, too stable. It's the source of the planet's weather control, its tectonic activity, everything. The planet isn't a death world by accident. It's a death world by design." A red marker blinked into existence on the map, deep within the heart of the Titan's spine. "The signal is coming from there," Anya said, zooming in on a specific, massive peak. A single, focused point of origin, buried deep within the mountains. "I don't know what it is, but it's artificial, and it's been running for a very, very long time." Commander Rostova stared at the blinking red light. The Conclave had sent them to survive, but the planet was offering them a key. A key to understanding who had built this world and why. "Eris," Rostova said, her voice sharp and decisive. "Get the ground-penetrating radar. Kenji, pack the geological survey kit. Jax, prepare your heavy gear. We're going on a little hike." The mission had just changed. Their objective was no longer survival. It was discovery. The journey north was a brutal education in the character of Xylos. They traveled in the mule. It was a 6-wheeled, heavily modified version of their original ground vehicle, with Eris Thorn at the controls. They crossed glass deserts, where millennia of lightning strikes had fused the sand into a smooth, treacherous surface. They navigated magnetic canyons where the mule's compass spun uselessly, forcing them to steer by the position of Xylos's twin suns. Twice, they were stalked by packs of shardstalkers. Their obsidian forms blended into the rocky landscape. Both times, Jax Malone's tactical awareness and the mule's exterior pulse cannons convinced the predators to seek easier prey. The planet tested them at every turn, but the gravity-forged humans were equal to the challenge. After 4 days, they reached the coordinates Anya had triangulated. It was a massive, singular peak in the Titan's spine range that the planets. Storms seemed to pivot around. The signal is coming from inside the mountain. Anya confirmed, her portable sensor array humming. Dead center. But there's no entrance. There is nothing on this planet that is what it first appears to be, Eris muttered. His eyes were scanning the cliff face. He pointed to a series of vertical, metallic veins running up the rock. The same conductive material he had used for their lightning rod network. That's not a natural deposit. It's a circuit. This whole cliff is a door. Rostova followed his logic. And how do we knock? The planet communicates with lightning. Eris replied with a grin. So we do the same. He and Jack spent the next hour rigging a directional antenna from the mule. They connected it to a discharge unit from their power core. It was a gamble. If they miscalculated the required charge, they could overload the circuit and bury the entrance forever. Ready when you are, Commander, Eris called. Do it, Rostova ordered. Eris threw the switch. A controlled bolt of brilliant blue energy, a miniature lightning strike, shot from the antenna. It slammed into the metallic veins. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum filled the air, resonating deep within the mountain. With the sound of grinding continents, a section of the cliff face, 100 meters high, began to retract inward. It revealed a perfect, dark archway. Well, Jack said, shouldering his rifle. They're hospitable. I'll give them that. They left the mule behind and proceeded on foot into the darkness. The tunnel was vast and silent, sloping gently downward. The air grew still and warm. The eternal howl of the wind faded behind them. After a kilometer, the tunnel opened into a cavern so immense their suit lights were swallowed by the darkness, activating wide-spectrum illumination. Rostova commanded. Floodlights on their shoulders sprang to life, bathing the cavern in stark white light. They all stopped, stunned into silence by what they saw. It was a city, a silent, subterranean metropolis of gracefully curving towers. The structures spiraled towards the unseen ceiling. In the center of the vast space floated a perfect sphere of milky white crystal. It was the size of a building, pulsing with a slow, internal light. This was the source of the signal, the heart of the planet. My God, Kenji Tanaka whispered. It's a library. They approached the central sphere with a mixture of caution and reverence. As they drew near, the surface of the sphere swirled. An interface point, a smooth, hand-sized indentation, materialized before Anya Sharma. It's waiting, she said, her voice filled with awe. She hesitated for only a second before placing her hand on the smooth surface. The moment she made contact, the library came alive. Light exploded from the central sphere. It projected a three-dimensional star chart into the vast chamber. Images, symbols, and equations flowed around them like a river of pure data. Anya gasped, her eyes wide as information poured directly into her neural interface. It's a history, she stammered, trying to process the flood. They were the architects. They were born here, on Xylos. This world was their cradle and their greatest creation. The holographic display shifted, showing the evolution of the architects. They were slender, bipedal beings. They had learned to master their world's ferocity. They didn't conquer the environment. They harmonized with it. The storms were their power plants. The gravity was their forge. The predators were their sparring partners, driving them to become stronger. They achieved a technological singularity. Anya translated, her voice trembling. They unlocked the secrets of genetics, matter, and energy. They learned to rewrite their own biology to perfectly suit this world. Eventually, they learned to shed their physical forms entirely. The display showed the architects becoming beings of pure energy. Their consciousnesses merged with the planetary systems they had built. They hadn't died. They had transcended. They left their collected knowledge, their entire civilization, as a legacy. It's a test, Rostova realized aloud. The planet. It's a final exam. They left it all behind for anyone who could prove themselves worthy by their definition. Not by conquering the world, but by adapting to it. As Anya dug deeper into the archive, she found a new section, a log file. It was labeled, Trials and Failures. Commander, she said, her voice grim. You need to see this. A new projection appeared. It showed a familiar, elegant Kthar research vessel entering Xylos' orbit. The date. Stamp was from 2 centuries ago. The library's external sensors had recorded the entire event. The holographic log showed the crystalline ship attempting to brute force its way through the atmosphere. Its rigid hull was unable to withstand the gravitational shears. It shattered into a million pieces. Another log appeared. A Swiss biosphere descending. The planet's automated systems identified the vessel's attempt to replace the local atmosphere with its own. In response, it subtly altered the atmospheric composition. It introduced a microbe that consumed the Swiss ship's hull with terrifying speed. The biosphere dissolved before it ever touched the ground. One by one, they watched the fates of all 17 conclave expeditions. Each had failed for the same fundamental reason. They tried to fight the planet. They used shields instead of aerodynamics. They relied on filtration instead of adaptation. They saw Xylos as an enemy to be defeated. The planet, the legacy of the architects, had judged them unworthy and broken them with casual, automated indifference. They never stood a chance. Eris said softly, and the conclave knows it. Rostova finished, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. They know they can't pass the test. They can't adapt. That's why they sent us. They weren't hoping we'd succeed. They were hoping we'd survive just long enough to open the front door for them. She looked at the faces of her team, hardened and forged by this world. She looked at the vast library of knowledge floating around them. The Sidonian conclave had made a fatal miscalculation. They had sent a team of expendable primitives to a world that only primitives, resilient, adaptable, stubborn humanity could ever hope to understand. They had sent them to retrieve a key, not realizing they were sending the only people in the galaxy who could actually fit the lock. 3 months passed. To the day after the team entered the architect's library, a new star appeared in the sky. It was the conclave retrieval vessel, the Stellarch's Wisdom. It descended through the atmosphere with an arrogance the Odyssey could never have managed. Its shields shimmered, effortlessly parting the plasma storms and neutralizing the atmospheric turbulence. It was a vessel designed to dominate a world, not adapt to it. It landed with barely a whisper a kilometer from Haven. Its pristine white hull was a stark insult to the battered, rust-colored landscape. Rostova watched its descent from Haven's primary observation dome. They're finally here. Took them long enough. Jax grunted, cleaning his pulse rifle. Must have taken them a while to build a ship they thought could handle the weather. The retrieval team approached Haven an hour later. There were 6 of them, marching in a tight, formal procession. They were encased in the same bulky EX-7 environment suits the humans had abandoned on their first day. Their movements were clumsy and labored under the heavy gravity. Their leader was a tall, insectoid creature from the Glyptal race, a species known for its rigid adherence to doctrine. His name was Delegate Zorax. He and his team stopped dead when they saw Haven. They had expected to find the wreckage of the Odyssey, perhaps a few desperate survivors in a failing habitat. Instead, they saw a thriving settlement. They saw xylocrete structures curving gracefully to blend with the landscape. They saw cultivated gardens under protective domes. They saw a network of humming conduits channeling energy from the sky itself. And most shockingly, they saw 5 humans in simple, practical work uniforms walking out to meet them. Their faces were exposed to the lethal air. Their bodies moved with a strength and ease that should have been impossible. Commander Rostova. Zorax's translated voice boomed from his suit's external speaker. He was unable to conceal his surprise. You are alive. And well, it seems. We are, Delegate, Rostova said, her voice calm and clear in the dense air. Welcome to Haven. Please, come inside. We can offer you a more comfortable atmosphere. She led the stunned delegation to their command center. The Glyptal and his companions cycled through the airlock. After their suit sensors confirmed the air was safe for them, they cautiously removed their helmets. They looked around at the clean, well-lit interior. Their multifaceted eyes took in the integrated systems and the calm efficiency of the human base. Zorax quickly recovered his composure, his arrogance reasserting itself. Commander, you have violated 17 different conclave protocols. The artifacts you were sent to locate were to be quarantined, not integrated into a provincial settlement. We did what was necessary to survive, Delegate, Rostova replied, gesturing for them to sit at the large holotable. Something your 17 predecessors failed to do. Zorax's mandibles clicked in irritation. The failures of previous expeditions are classified. Your primary mission was to survive and report. Instead, you have been reckless, contaminating a priceless archaeological site. He slammed a gauntlet fist on the table. By the authority of the Sidonian Conclave, I am assuming command of this operation. Your team will transfer all data logs, surrender all recovered materials, and confine yourselves to your vessel for debriefing. Rostova didn't reply. Instead, she looked at Anya, who gave a slight nod. Delegate, Rostova said, her voice deceptively mild. Before you assume command of anything, perhaps you should review the data we've already gathered. The holotable flickered to life. It didn't show schematics or artifacts. It showed a recording from the architect's library. The image was of a glyptal ship from Zorax's own species attempting to land on Xylos 50 years prior. It showed the ship's engines failing as the planet's EM field overloaded them, and the vessel crashing into a mountain. Log entry, Trial 12. Species, glyptal, a calm, synthesized voice announced. Methodology, brute force application of kinetic and energy shielding. Result, catastrophic failure. Core weakness, inability to adapt tactical approach. Survival time, 4.3 hours. Zorax stared, speechless. Rostova switched the image. A Kthar vessel shattering. A Swiss biosphere dissolving. One by one, she played the final, pathetic moments of every failed conclave mission. We know why you sent us here, Rostova said, her voice now cold as ice. You didn't think we could succeed. You hoped we were just tough enough to survive. The landing, open the front door to the library, and then die like all the rest, leaving the spoils for you. This is an outrageous interpretation of classified data. Zorax blustered, his authority crumbling. It is not an interpretation. It is a fact, Rostova countered. You see this planet as a treasure chest to be cracked open. We see it as a teacher, and it has taught us a great deal. Outside, the sky had darkened. The wind began to howl, the prelude to one of Xylos's ferocious electrical storms. The lights in the command center flickered as the atmospheric pressure changed. The visiting aliens shifted nervously. Your settlement will not survive this storm, one of Zorax's aides stammered, pointing a trembling claw at the viewport. Our sensors indicate it is a Class 5 energy event. You are correct, Rostova said, not taking her eyes off Zorax. It is a Class 5 event. They happen every 12 hours. We use them to recharge our primary batteries. She turned, her head slightly towards Anya. Anya, the delegation is looking a bit nervous. Could you calm things down for them? Anya Sharma smiled and typed a short sequence into her console. Outside, the impossible happened. The screaming wind died to a whisper. The violent, purple lightning that had begun to claw at the sky dissipated. The oppressive, dark clouds parted. Directly over Haven, creating a circle of calm, clear sky. The storm still raged on the horizon, but around the human settlement, there was peace. Delegate Zorax and his team stared out the viewport. Their alien minds struggled to comprehend what they had just witnessed. They had come here as masters, as a rescue party for primitives. They now understood they were children playing in the shadow of a power they could not even begin to measure. Rostova stood up. Her silhouette was framed by the now peaceful Xyland sky. Delegate, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. You are not in command here. We are. Now, let's discuss humanity's new terms of partnership with the Sidonian Conclave. The silence in the command center was a weapon in itself. Delegate Zorax and his team stood frozen. Their previous arrogance was shattered. They had come to this world expecting to dictate terms to a band of struggling primitives. Instead, they had been shown their own insignificance in the face of a power they could neither comprehend nor control. The storm on the horizon remained. A caged beast, held at bay by a simple command from a human. Please, sit, delegate, Rostova said. Her voice cut through the tension. It wasn't a request. She returned to her seat at the head of the holotable, the picture of calm authority, Zorax. And his attendants complied. Their movements were stiff and reluctant. They were no longer a retrieval team. They were captives in all but name. Their fate was hanging on the words of a species they had dismissed as inconsequential. The Sidonian Conclave has misjudged humanity, Rostova began. Her gaze swept across the unnerved aliens. You viewed us as reckless, primitive, a species to be managed and, if necessary, sacrificed. You were wrong. Our supposed recklessness is adaptability. Our perceived primitivism is resilience. You have spent millennia engineering hardship out of your existence. You have embraced comfort and stagnation. In doing so, you have made yourselves unfit to inherit the legacy of your own ancestors. The architect's technology belongs to the conclave by right of succession. One of the aides, a tentacled being, protested weakly. You have no rights here. Jax Malone's deep voice rumbled from his position by the door. You failed the entrance exam 17 times. The architects did not leave behind a mere collection of tools and weapons for you to plunder, Rostova continued, ignoring the interruption. They left behind a philosophy, a path. They taught us that the universe does not reward those who hide from its challenges, but those who rise to meet them. Their library is not just a repository of knowledge. It is the final lesson from a species that mastered adaptation. A lesson you are incapable of learning on your own. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Zorax's. Therefore, the old arrangement is void. Humanity is not petitioning for membership in your conclave. We are not asking for territory or technology. We are presenting you with a new reality. She gestured to Anya, who brought a new projection to life on the holodable. It was a formal charter written in the universal mathematical language of the architects. We are establishing the Xylos Accord, Rostova declared. This world, under human administration, will become a center for adaptive studies. The knowledge in the architect library will be unlocked, studied, and disseminated, but only to those who prove themselves worthy. Worthy? Zorax's mandibles clicked with indignation. And you, a species that has only just begun to travel the stars, will be the judge of that. We are the only species to have passed the architect's test, Rostova stated simply. That makes us the curators of their legacy. The gatekeepers, your people, delegate, and any other species in the conclave are welcome to participate. You may send your brightest minds to Haven. Here, they will learn from us. They will live on this world, breathe its air, feel its gravity. They will learn to adapt, to be resilient, to shed the technological crutches that have made you weak. They will learn what it means to be a worthy successor. In return for this education, the knowledge we unlock will be shared for the benefit of all. The audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. Humanity was not asking for a seat at the table. They were building a new, more important table and inviting the old masters to sit as students. This is preposterous. The conclave will never agree to such a humiliation, Zorax snarled. Then the conclave will be left behind, Rostova said with a shrug. We hold the key to the next stage of galactic evolution. We have the strength and adaptability to unlock it. You do not. You have two choices. Join us in a new partnership, with humanity leading the way. Or return to your stagnant, comfortable worlds and watch as we reshape the future without you. The choice is yours, but this offer will be made only once. Zorax was trapped. He saw the truth in her words. The conclave was an ancient, brittle institution, terrified of change. But it was also desperate for the power the architects represented. To refuse meant being cut off from the greatest discovery in millennia. To accept meant submitting to the authority of a species they considered their inferiors. You will transmit our proposal to Proctor Valerius and the rest of the conclave, Rostova commanded. You have 1 standard week to give us your answer. 1 month later, Rostova stood on the observation deck of the newly expanded Haven Command Tower. Below, the settlement hummed with activity. The first transport ship from the Cynean conclave was descending from the violet sky. Its elegant form looked fragile and out of place against the jagged mountains. It carried not soldiers or bureaucrats, but scientists, engineers, and Zenists. They were the first students of the Xylos Accord. The conclave, after a week of furious and terrified debate, had accepted humanity's terms. They had no other choice. Rostova looked out at the landscape of Xylos. The storm still raged on the horizon, but they no longer seemed angry. They were simply a part of the world's powerful, living rhythm. The crimson moss carpeted the valley. In the distance, she could see a herd of shardstalkers moving across the plains. They gave the human settlement a wide, respectful berth, This world was no longer a prison or a tomb. It was a crucible that had forged humanity into something new, something stronger. They had been sent to this death world as a test, a pawn in a galactic game. They had emerged as its masters, the unlikely heirs to a legacy of unimaginable power and the new arbiters of the galaxy's destiny.